so we should be good.
Sounds good.
Okay. You're live.
Good afternoon. I want to welcome everybody to the February 16th workshop for the Wenatchee School Board, and I'll call the meeting to order. And today we're going to have a discussion on our strategic plan and hear from the committee members who have been working with Paul on that plan. So we're anxious to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Laura. We are as well. We're excited to welcome our committee members in. I'm just going to share real quick my screen, just give the board and everybody our agenda so we can all kind of see that real quickly. So we'll do welcome and outcomes. How did we get to this point? And that's going to be from back to transition plan, vision versus promise. And then we're really going to hand it over. The vast majority, my piece is going to go really quickly. And then the vast majority will be the team talking about the work that they've done over these past 4 meetings, and then them showing you the current draft of their work. So really, and then we'll get back into the board where the board will engage in some reflections and some work. So my hope and our outcomes that we designed for today is for reflections from the board on the Strategic Planning Committee's draft promise, a discussion on strategic priority from academic excellence to opportunities. So that's what we're hoping we will get out of this today. But let me just remind everybody, you know, the journey that we've been on to get to this point. Not including the last 4 meetings. This journey really started back in my transition period, where Diane and I had the opportunity to engage with literally over 1,000 people. And then through the surveying, you know, then you amplify that by, I think, over 2,000 additional individuals who engaged with us. And if you remember, one of the points in there was a SWOT analysis. You know, we consistently asked in our one-on-one or in our group settings, small group and large group settings, those same questions around opportunities, successes, challenges, barriers. So we were consistently taking notes, and then the survey itself asked those questions. Based off of that, we did that SWOT analysis. And wherever we've been, whatever group we have brought forward that information. We brought it forward to the board. We brought it forward to the administrative team. And we also brought it forward to this committee so they could look at all the information. We also started engaging the board after the transition process. We really began with the prior board, starting to work through some of those value conversations, and then transitioned into our new board, where we started to really solidify those value pieces. From there, the board moved forward to bringing in a larger committee of different stakeholders. We have school admin, we have teachers, we have classified staff members, we have students, we have parents, and we have community members. So it truly is a diverse stakeholder group that has agreed to come on board and put significant time already. Even though we've had 4 meetings, every one of those meetings, it's an hour and a half, except for the last one. The last one was 2.5 hours, basically. Every minute it is utilized for the interest of moving our strategic plan forward. And I have to say, the strategic plan committee has been outstanding, really thoughtful, insightful, engaging multiple people when we ask them. Each at the end of each meeting, or when I send out the next agenda item, there's always homework for our team to do, and this team goes after it. They're going to talk to you a little bit about what did that look like from their perspective and who they've been engaging with. Generally, it's been from that perspective, either a parent or a staff member or a student perspective, where they're gathering more of that that similar perspective, not that it has to be, but it really has been an outstanding group to work with. And I said this before, actually Diana and I just get out of the way. That's our best talent, is rolling our chairs back and allowing the 17 people. Now we had one individual who his work commitment just became a little too much, Jorge, for him. And he just sent me a note literally last Thursday night saying, I just can't, I can't balance the two right now. But again, it's been really good. So pleased with that. And then they're going to talk to you here in a moment about their work. One of the things that we've been talking about has been this vision versus promise. And where our group is at is really gravitating more toward a promise. And I'll tell you why. From a couple different perspectives, and probably the most impactful perspective was when you translate it into Spanish, and the power that the promise had. So overall, a promise for us, we really feel like a vision is also aspirational. A promise is aspirational. A promise, though, becomes a little bit more personal. It almost feels like when you're speaking with your kids or your family, there's a commitment there. There's a connection there. It's that personal piece. But when you translate it, when we looked at the definition of a promise and a vision in Spanish, that's when it almost solidified it for us. A promise in Spanish is a vow, a hope, an undertaking. From the vision from English, and it was more just that aspirational hope, that reaching out. And that's really what the team continues to gravitate towards. As one group said about 2 meetings ago, where they were engaging with students, they said, just do what you mean you say you're going to do. Stop messing around. Be really clear. Your words and actions need to follow up, and too often your words don't match your actions. And that started really gravitating us towards that promise. Like, I can see you, student, and this is the promise that I want to make to you. Again, out of the mouth of babes is usually where we find our greatest clarity, is from our students. So that's where we've been. And I want to turn it over to our team to first introduce themselves, give a little bit of your background, kind of what is your connection, who you are, and your connection to the group and your connection to the district. Jerry, you want to kick us off?
Sure thing. So my name is Jerry Glines. I was a lifelong student of Wenatchee School District from kindergarten through my senior year. So lived here, grew up here. It was all I knew until I hit college. I then transitioned. I got a bachelor's degree. I moved down to Utah, and I spent 15 years down in Utah. I now work in the IT department for Western Governors University. So I have a higher ed background at this point in time. And just recently, just before last school year, transitioned back to Wenatchee, brought my kids with me. So I now have a 7th grader and a 4th grader in the school district as well. So I come at this with a past student, present student, parent, and community and higher education background. So I kind of cover a whole lot of everything.
Jerry, thank you. Arlette?
Hi, my name is Arlette Lopez Rodriguez, and I am currently a senior at Wenatchee High School, and I'm proud to be a student representative on the SPT, as well as the community ambassador for the high school's cultural club, Mecha. And a little bit on my background. Of course, I don't have much educational experience in higher ed, except for taking a few classes at WVC, and I've really enjoyed just kind of getting to know more educational and more educational experience on sociology and just educational administration. It's very interesting to me.
Arlette is not doing herself justice. She holds us accountable every meeting. Her and Denali, like, they've dropped the hammer on us adults. Michelle.
Hi, everyone. Michelle Job. I'm basically functioning as a parent in the district. I have 3 kids. 2 of them have already graduated out of the high school. My youngest one is at the high school now. My daughter went to Valley Academy for 8 years, and so we were pretty involved there. And then my boys went to Lewis and Clark for the dual language program. So I figure I probably spent a few thousand hours at Lewis and Clark volunteering. And then so similarly at Foothills, because I coached math there for, I don't know, 8 years, I think. So along with Michelle Sandberg, we did it together a couple of years. Yeah, I've also been on several district committees, the PBIS district committee, as well as I'm also on the high school parent advisory team, which of course hasn't been meeting for the last year, but I assume that we're still a team. Yeah, so yeah, that's kind of where I am.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Rebecca.
All right. I'm Rebecca Carter, and I have 4 students in the district, and one of them is a 5th grader in a self-contained special ed classroom. So I'm kind of functioning from that perspective as a parent. He goes to Lincoln, and then I have 3 others that attend Valley Academy of Learning. I also taught at both Valley Academy and Wenatchee High School. And so I'm kind of all over the place as far as perspective goes, but I'm here mostly as a parent and community parent representative.
Thank you, Rebecca. So let's get started. Jerry's going to give you an overview of our meetings, our processes, and then all the other committee members feel free to jump in. And then we're going to hand it over to board members just to ask questions about that process. And then we'll continue to move through where we're going to introduce the draft statement. And then we'll finish up with talking about a strategic priority adjustment that we would like to make. So Jerry, you want to kick us off again?
Sure thing. I'm good at talking. So we met for the first time back in December. December 10th, I believe, was the date. It was our first meeting. It was a great chance to see who had been brought together from the community, meet the students, meet each other, and just do some team building activities. We spent a lot of time that meeting setting the norms and the expectations, which we now review at the beginning of each meeting. It's a great reminder of all those promises we've made to each other as we work towards making a promise to the students. We reviewed in that first meeting why we were there, what the process would look like, who was going to be involved, and what we plan to accomplish. And then we left that meeting with being tasked by using our contacts within the schools and communities to gather ideas of what people, the community members, the parents, the students, what they're looking for in a promise from the Wenatchee School District. So then, of course, we took that nice long break because of all of our wonderful holidays at the end of the year. And we met again, and we now meet the 2nd and 4th Tuesday of every month. So we met in January on the 14th and the 28th. That first meeting in January, we got back together, and it was our first chance to really hunker down and start working on this. We although we did pause, we opened with a community building moment, which was great. We called it an aha moment. I went through the meeting minutes today, and it was great to look back at all of the things we had really discussed. We went through and talked about what really stood out to us from that first meeting as we met each other, or the different things that we had been, the different materials we had been provided with, what really stood out about this process and everything. So that was fun to get kind of a new introduction to everybody and how they really think and look at things. From there, we broke into small groups, which we have done at all the consecutive meetings. So we break into small groups. We discuss what promises we wanted to make based on what we had gathered from others in the community. We talked about different keywords and how to put those into a statement. Then we came back together and we shared and discussed those items. We followed that up on the 28th of January. We got put into new small groups, which is really great. It gives us a chance to mix things up. We work with different members of the committee each time. We get introduced in that small group to new perspectives each time. It really allows us to take in all of the different voices and be able to bring our thoughts together. Each group attempted in that meeting to refine keywords and ideas into a promise. So we had talked about keywords, ideas, and everything in the first meeting. We brought those together, tried to build promises. We discussed the gathering of outside voices. One of the things that really stood out to me, and I had to laugh a little bit as I went through the meeting minutes, kind of putting this review together. As Dr. Gordon stated, students are blunt. So that came out very apparent in our speaking with students and community. The students are blunt, they're happy to help, and they're really appreciative of the fact that they're being included in this process. That came through. However, on the flip side of that, we found some community members were great about getting back. They really thought through their responses. I believe Michelle ended up with tons of responses. However, on some sides, the community members ended up being very short-term focused. They had a really hard time looking at that big 5-year picture and being brought around to that. And some of them really voiced a skepticism towards what promises actually fulfill. Like, can we really realize what we promise? So that really gives you a drive to want to make sure that what you're promising is achievable and is something that people can get behind. At the end of that, we ended that meeting with an open and very honest discussion. It really centered a lot around DEI, the diversity, equality, and inclusion, which carried over into our last meeting as well. And those are some of the things we've really built around as we've come up with this draft. I'm going to go ahead and let Rebecca talk about our last meeting and then lead that into the promise that we have to present for you today.
So in between the last meeting in January and our most recent meeting in February, we were given kind of some wordsmithed versions of the promise statement that were taken from all of the things that we talked about as a group and the words that we had and even the phrases, and just kind of an open-ended attempt to give us something concrete, comment on, and change around, and something to be looking at in between. And then we were tasked with really coming to last week's meeting with something that we felt like was an actual promise statement that we thought would really be something we could get behind as a committee and as an individual, and reflected all of the things that we had heard from the different members that we had spoken with in the community. And so we came to the meetings and we did our community building time, and then we really got straight to our small group time, and we spent some extended time in small groups. These were different small groups again, and we fleshed out how we felt about these different versions, what things we felt like they were missing or what we would like to add or change. And we were tasked with, after that time, really coming up with something that we felt like as a group we could endorse as the promise statement. So we came back together and we reported back on all of our different ideas as a group. And then we went through what looked like a lot of similarities and kind of had discussion about the differences and what we wanted it to sound like and the length and what we kind of revisited what the goal and aim of the promise statement was and really clarified that to make sure that we were headed in the right direction. And then as we were speaking and doing our discussions and making our commentary, we really came up with one kind of solidified option. And we were able to vote a tentative, yes, we could endorse this, and open to some still further adjustments as we move forward.
Nicely done. Arlette or Michelle, any other color commentary you would add to that great description? Other perspectives? Okay. Board members, anything on the process? You heard Jerry and Rebecca kind of give you a quick 4-week overview of our process. Any questions for the team on just the process itself?
Do you have when you all went out and gathered information from your contacts, did you ever quantify the number of contacts you were able to make in the community, or put a face on, what that group looked like collectively, demographically, or
Great
any
question.
other feedback on that?
Michelle and Arlette, you want to kick that off?
I know I had over 100 households respond to me, probably closer to 120. And I mean, demographically, I would say, I'm going to say probably 80% of the people were sort of people that I might consider my peers. And that's one of the things I like about how diverse our group is I felt like I didn't have, that was fine. That was sort of who I had, and other people were going to have other things. I did have diversity in my feedback though, and I was very intentional about reaching out to people. Again, with all of my years at Lewis and Clark, I definitely have a number of contacts of people that I've just gotten to know over the years, and I very much intentionally reached out to them. So, and I actually did quantify all of my answers. What I did was, and people responded in as little as a paragraph and in as much as an essay. And so some people took a lot of time to answer. Some people said, I need to have several days to do this, and you could tell in their response. Some people had their kids respond in addition to them, or their husbands or spouses. But so because I was actually, to be honest, getting a little overwhelmed with all the responses because I didn't expect such a flood. And so I started essentially making a list of the themes and then tallying every time that theme was repeated. The nice thing about that is it made it very easy for me to know what were the big, the heavy hitters in terms of what people wanted promised to their kids. So I had a great experience with it, other than sort of feeling like, oh my gosh, I hope I can do justice to all the work that people have put into this. And that was something I said right away in our second meeting, is it really impressed me how willing people were to answer that question: what should the Wenatchee School District promise its students? And if if I'd kept going, I'm sure we could have gotten a lot more responses as well. That was sort of just my first, sort of hit out of the park, as I just contacted as many people as I could. But and I will say, there was the comment made, I can't remember if that was you, Rebecca, but or actually I think it was Jerry. There were some people who said they couldn't get beyond COVID. They just wanted to talk about COVID and what they wanted the district to do. And so I just sort of went back to those people and said, I think that's really great. And would you also think about the promises that you would like to see 5 years from now? So do a bigger sort of umbrella statement. And everybody was willing to do that as well. So.
Yeah,
So
great.
did that answer your question, Laura?
Yeah, thank you for that. So
Arlette?
you were very busy. So I'm curious about the rest of the group. You got over 100, 120 or so.
Mm-hmm.
So how many responses in total do you think you brought to the conversation, everybody collectively?
There had to be, a few hundred, but I'll let Arlette kind of talk about from the student piece, and then Rebecca and Jerry kind of chime in as well.
Yeah, for in terms of the quantitative number, we unfortunately did not tally up or make a survey, but me and Denali really focused on our AVID class, the Mecha class, and the Mecha club. And we reached out to a few other clubs for feedback as well, but we just sent out those surveys. And so with sending out the surveys, we added the questions of demographics, their etc. So with that, we're hoping to get a little bit more specific numbers in regards to what the districts should be prioritized, students feel should be prioritized. But based on the conversations we've had, like Dr. Gordon said, my peers are very open, very honest on what they want the district. And just some of the themes was just open communication with students. Definitely when there's some just news going on with the board, some students do appreciate the weekly emails, the board meeting, the minutes, and just I think for the rest of for the school, it would be appreciated just a little bit more communication in, like, I don't want to say a more kid-friendly way, but Denali had mentioned students respond to Instagram, they respond to social media, so just kind of advertising what the work we're doing. And in regards to the promise, like I said, we're sending out a survey, so we're hoping to get a response on what they think of our newly revised promise. And I will be sharing that with Diana, and hopefully she can send that out to the board.
Two of our teachers also reached out to students as well. Sheena, and all of a sudden,
Janelle and
yeah.
Donna are
Donna.
both teachers.
Donna.
Oh, yeah. So we had a number of staff members who reached out just directly to students as well. So a good representation. Rebecca or Jerry, any other aspect you would share on that topic?
I just wanted to point out that one of the things that we discussed and why it looked the way it did was that we felt like having conversations that were real, authentic conversations with people that we were already in relationship with were going to provide us with some deeper insight and maybe additional layers of honesty and kind of pointedness that people are willing to share, and the effectiveness of that versus just sending out a paper pencil, or I guess probably not paper pencil, but a computer survey, and what you would get from that versus relational conversation. So we really focused on prioritizing those people that we were already in contact with and in relationship with in order to facilitate those deeper conversations.
I have one more thing to add. Laura, you might find this interesting. So the second meeting, I was in a breakout room with Sheena from Westside. And I don't think she and I have we have quite a number of degrees of separation. You know, we're just different ages, you know, we have different roles we're playing, but it was interesting because we came back with the same feedback. So the feedback that she was getting from a younger group, she was talking to a lot of students, that sort of thing, was the same as the feedback that I got from, you know, say a little bit older of a generation, a parent generation. So that was sort of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to follow up on that, were any of these conversations targeted towards our Spanish speaking community? And then Michelle Job, you mentioned, you know, that 80% of them were your peers. So were we talking to, say, your non-traditional family who, you know, is working in the orchards? So was there more of an outreach for that population as well?
Maria, who's on the BPAC board, she did a nice job there. Jorge, before he had to resign, was really making sure that he was getting perspective from members of the Latino community. So I really feel like it was a nice, diverse collection of opinions, thoughts, and ideas on where we're at. I know Arlette was focused on the groups that she'd mentioned are very heavy Latino student population as well. So I do believe it was a diverse group who we were gathering information from. Teammates?
So I have a question. So the committee got all this input from families, adults, students. How did you weigh the student input if it was different than the non-student input? Because we're making a promise to students, right? So those voices, some might argue, are more important or maybe more valid. I don't know. But I'd like to know how that student feedback was incorporated, or whether it really reflected what everybody else was saying. Thank you.
So I'm just going to let you, the students are Jason, Arlette, Denali, and Lizbeth is in college right now, but a former Wenatchee High School grad.
And Aria.
Bring it. They bring it. And Aria, did I say Aria? Sorry. So we've got 3.5 students, I think, who literally bring it, and their voice, I think, is very well represented. But I would ask Arlette, a very honest, candid, and she will be honest and candid with you if I'm wrong on my assessment. I guarantee you this. If they have airtime at those meetings, Arlette.
Definitely. And certainly when we maybe hold off big group discussions, Dr. Gordon does a good job of facilitating or asking when the voices who aren't really talking, he makes sure to point that out. But at least for me, I believe the students are having enough discourse, very much so in the breakout rooms.
And Michelle, I would say, when I was sort of tallying the feedback, I didn't give more weight to any particular person. Everybody just got a tally mark. But the students, by and large, who responded to me, their focus tended to be around, they wanted to be able to be who they were in our schools and be accepted. And that came through loud and clear in our discussions. So.
Yeah, and I think Sheena echoed that same thing from her conversations with students as well. And that was the safety and caring relationships both between staff and students, and then the being valued and accepted in their school community with other students as well, came out very strongly, and I think factored into a lot of what we based the promise around, really.
Other questions or comments on the process?
I love that you guys did small groups and had different interactions with different members of the larger group. That provides, I think, a richer experience, right, in a large committee setting like that. So thank you everyone for participating in this group.
Yeah, and I intentionally highlight this. Diana, myself, or Kim were never in their groups, other than for me to poke in for like 2 seconds to say, you've got 10 minutes, you got 20 minutes, you've got, how are you doing? They were their groups. We sat in the waiting room. We kind of waited outside as the committee had their debates. This was not about Paul, Diana, or Kim jumping into those meetings. It was their voice, their perspectives, as we went through this process. All right, let's unveil, the draft. And as a reminder to everybody, we're in a feedback loop. One of the most important things that we do is continuously iterate, gather feedback, go back out. This is part of that feedback process. This is not a done statement. This is a statement where we're at today. And today, the intention of today is to gather the board's feedback, and then for the team to go back and then to get on with a stakeholder group, and then on with the, I think it was the cabinet admin team feedback loop as well. So all those feedback loops that we shared at the very beginning of the process, that's where we're at. So when you see it, what we're going to be looking for, they're going to talk to you about it. They're going to kind of give you the why behind the language and every word. I'm telling you, every word was parsed over. Every word was really debated, discussed, and made sure that it was purposeful. So I'm going to share my screen one more time just to see it in writing, because sometimes that's a little bit easier. I'm going to highlight, I'm going to expand it a little bit on my current screen before I share it. Come back over.
And while Paul's doing that, just to acknowledge the amount of work that this committee has put in, you can relive every minute of it. All the videos are available on our website. In last week's weekly update, I included just kind of a quick overview of the work that this team has done, but also linked that to our strategic plan website where all of the notes and all of the videos are at. So if you want to go back and look at some of those really difficult conversations at times, deep conversations, like Paul said, parsing over the words because words matter. You can review those, and I would highly encourage you to do so because they're great meetings. 2.5 hours flew by because there were such enriching and engaging conversations. So just wanted to draw attention to that we do have that archive available.
Thanks, Diana. So hopefully you see it up on your screen. I've got the little green box around the right one, so it should be up there. So I'll let the board just kind of absorb the words. Our promise is to build school communities that are safe, accepting, and caring, grounded in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our students will be academically prepared for life beyond graduation to pursue their desired personal pathways with competency and confidence. So I would ask Arlette and Rebecca to kind of give us the play-by-play on this, and then for Jerry and Michelle to add any other details, and then turn it back over to the board to kind of get into the details. So Arlette and Rebecca, it's your.
I think, as I mentioned before, you can really see in there echoed kind of the central tenets of diversity, equity, inclusion, and the value for individual students to be accepted and to have relationships that support them in our school system. And then the second part, talking about students being academically prepared, we had a lot of conversation about what that means and what that looks like, and that really looks different for each student according to their family background and desires, you know, in addition to their own personal desires. And so kind of coming to a team approach to their preparation to help them get where they want to go. And so really a lot of this is focused on individual students and knowing them, valuing them, and valuing the things that are important to them and helping them get where they want to go. And then again, that real core of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And all of those things were discussed by the students that we heard from. and were things that staff and community members were feeling like were really, really important to them.
Yeah, kind of building off of that, I think we all came to an agreement that, diversity, equity, and inclusion is something solid that we just need to have in this specific statement in order to just really move towards that bigger mission that we're later gonna go into. But yeah, we all came to an agreement that I think Michelle will talk about this in a little bit, but instead of academic excellence, to really prioritize community building, safety, and opportunities. So it's more headed towards that anti-racist system that we want to be. And I think that was really loud and clear that that's what mostly every single team member said that would be the priority. And students as well, we think it's very important to keep this implemented and grounded.
Michelle or Jerry?
I think I referenced earlier that, when we were getting our feedback, and I found that my feedback reflected everybody's feedback for the most part from the community. The two big themes were academics. People want their kids to be well educated, families want their kids to be well educated, and they want their kids to be safe to be who they are in our school. And, it was interesting to have so much feedback around safety, but yet realizing none of it had to do with, I think this was brought up in our last meeting, safety outside our school walls. It was all within our school walls. So, people were not giving feedback about, say, gun violence and things like that. It was all about kids just being able to be accepted for who they are in our schools and be valued and to be seen for their potential. So I'm happy with, there's probably still wordsmithing to do, but I'm happy with how we got those two big themes in one promise. As I said in our last meeting, I think if you only focus on kids feeling good, or if you only focus on getting kids academically prepared, it's sort of a tragedy because they're so interwoven and you really can't have one without the other.
I'll bring up a big discussion we had at the end of our last meeting had to do with those two last words on there, the competence and confidence words. It was a really interesting discussion because a lot of people on the committee felt that those two things are kind of just inherent in the promise, and others felt like it was extremely important to have them stated, have them called out. And the idea is that, just because we have them prepared academically, we can teach them whatever, we can make sure they're getting straight A's, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually confident that they can do the things that they know how to do or that they can survive in a world outside of high school. And that they really do have the confidence to take on the next challenge, that they have the confidence that they will survive, that they will succeed and be able to pursue those opportunities that they want to pursue. So that was a big one, as well as the diversity, equity, and inclusion, the DEI, which I stated when we were talking about. We've had a few big, long, meaningful discussions within the committee about those words and what they mean and how important they are, and the fact that they need to be in there in some way, in some fashion, and how it's important to build around those. So as everybody said, there's still some wordsmithing to do. There's a review that needs to be done on this to determine if this is all part of the promise or if some of this belongs in key values. It's definitely not done, but it is something that everybody felt comfortable with as a primary draft to bring to you.
If I could just add on to what Jerry said about the word competence, because we did have a big discussion about this at our last meeting. And I was making the argument, which I feel really strongly about, that we have a national problem in our country where kids are not graduating from high school. This is not particular to our high schools, but nationally where kids are not graduating prepared for the next level of education, with which the vast majority of them will need for the job market. And specifically that's in math. Math is the big gatekeeper for nationally for our students in terms of being able to move on to community college, vocational college, the military, four-year university, of course. And so I feel strongly that if we're gonna change that we have to explicitly say it. We have to say we're gonna make them competent in these areas, particularly in math and English.
Could somebody speak to pursue their desired? Because that too was an important conversation that everyone had.
Yes, I believe we switched it to just their personal pathways to their desired, just to really emphasize the importance that not all students want the same career or pathway, or, you know, to go to a four-year university or college. So I think we all believed it was really important to implement their desired personal pathways. So in order for the district to really offer and support different career pathways after high school. That way it's not just kind of guiding to one thing.
Other takeaways, committee members, that you want to highlight for the board before we turn it over to the board? All right, board members, questions for the committee members, thoughts, perspectives, your turn.
I love the initial statement. I think it's all encompassing, and I think it's great. It's a beautiful statement.
I agree. I think my perspective on this is a really big promise to our kids. And these are big shoes we have to fill. You know, the fact that we're making the promise to create safe, accepting, and caring, that is grounded in this diversity, equity, and inclusion piece, because my experience in our school system is completely different than somebody who's white or part of the LGBTQ community. So, you know, this first part of it, I think as parents, as students, I think this is, it's key and it's super important. And this is the big promise to fulfill. We can get there. We can get there. And then the second part, absolutely, I agree with Arlette's statement in regards to pursue their desired personal pathways, because the reality is that we need, you know, your MBAs, we need teachers, but we also need plumbers, we also need mechanics, we also need, waste management workers. So this encompasses all levels of what we need to have a successful community. So, and you know what that means in regards to competence and confidence, I think that's guided by that pathway. So appreciate it. Good work.
I just want to echo what both Laura and Maria have said. I like the entire statement. And I agree, you can't have the first part without the second. The first part is a slam dunk, in my opinion. Putting the DEI on there is, I think, necessary for our district to move forward. And the second part, I believe that competence is a key word. Again, as we're looking at students' different pathways, whether students are getting education beyond graduation through a community college, a four-year university, a trade school option, we want to be sure that they're that they have those competencies down, that they don't need remedial education. So I think it's wonderful how it's written currently. So that's my input. Thanks.
I have some comments. I think the first one is I do like the change from to promise from a vision, because I can see the Spanish translation, and it isn't jargon in the business engineering, social engineering world. So I think that's very, very good. And I think this statement, I wrote good as far as it goes, and then I think I'd really say excellent. I don't think there's going to be much we can do to improve that. Then I'm going to express a prejudice about strategic planning. I don't think mission statements and vision statements are strategic plans. We talked previously in the board as opposed to in the citizen group. And to me, this is the next step. Is a good strategic plan tells you where your priority action areas are. Now, Michelle made the comment that she links competence with mathematics. Now, mathematics is maybe below the scope for a top priority, or maybe not, but it does illustrate the uncertainty in going from a promise in generic words to a strategic plan with bone, muscle, and resources. And actually, just as I'm very much excited, I received a letter from a very wise educator at email actually this last week. And it says very much what you've done. And I'm just going to read. We have focused our schools around, quote, a learning culture, curriculum alignment, assessment measures, professional learning, all appropriate and essential. However, we need to also focus on developing an equity culture in our schools. An equity culture responds to the needs of individual students. And here's the part that needs to follow up, and provides the resources, actions is my word, each student needs to succeed. When we integrate the learning culture with an equity culture, we find highly successful schools. And it goes on to say the words demonstrate that belief, recognizing that, and then I'll punch the underline, every student and their success matters. So I think it's great, but I do think that if we're going to have a real strategic plan, there needs to be follow-up.
Julie?
Yeah, I'm just processing it a little bit. I think this moves, and I'm trying to figure out where it fits with kind of some of the work we did in the discussion we had about partnerships. I think that statement that Martin read was pretty spot on, that, you know, maybe it needs to be, I think that was some of our hope and intent when we started talking about partnerships, because we realized students learn differently. And so, and I see some of it captured in this, the safety, creating the partnerships, develops safety, trust, equity in terms of giving individual students what they need. And so I'm disappointed not to see the partnership aspect in this statement, because that felt a little bit more tangible to me. I struggle with having to articulate that we're going to be carrying and grounded in diversity and whatnot, because and maybe it's how I was raised. It's just like, it feels like that should be innate, but I realize that's not maybe what all society, how they've been brought up or perceive things. So if it's, you know, helpful to have the commitment out there, then, I mean, I think it's great, but we've got to put actual measurement, you know, we've got to put substance behind it. You know, it just where I thought we were going would have maybe flipped the concept, although they're both really important. That, you know, when I first read it, I don't feel like academics is really a focus, but if we're hearing from students that safety needs to be the focus, you know, like I said, I'm still trying to process it, but I was surprised to see the movement away from our partnerships, because I felt like that really was intended to accomplish some of this equity and realizing students learn differently and do things differently and creating safe learning environments. But it's a great statement. I have no issue. I'm more sad for society that we even have to put things out there in some ways, but I do realize that that's the reality that we're living in. And I think it's important if we can create measurable goals under it.
So to both Martin and Julie, we haven't lost it. So let me kind of bring us back to the bigger strategic plan. A strategic plan, this is a strategic plan. A strategic plan has a promise of vision. A strategic plan has values, and a strategic plan has strategic priorities. So let me reshare my screen. So these are still, again, we're still drafting through, but the top of the chart is the big picture. Where are we going as an organization? And then it's slowly, think about it as a funnel, starts to come in a little bit. Here are the values that we're going to hold ourselves accountable when we're hiring, when we're doing our day-to-day work. Here are the priorities. Here, Martin, is the meat and bones around these three components. This is where you will see within those the thriving environment. You're going to see the social emotional work come alive here. You're going to see, make sure that we have environments that are welcoming to students from a physical environment. You're going to see in partnerships, how critical partnerships are to making these come alive. This is how the strategic priorities are, how you make this actionable. These are the words, this is the piece that drives us. The top part, the bottom part are the nuts and bolts that the community holds us accountable on a day-to-day basis, that will have KPIs to them, key performance indicators, or whatever terminology we come up with. But partnerships, the work the board did on these strategic priorities is really good, and it can't be lost. This will be on the front page of our strategic priority. Where are we going? What are we doing? Because so those next steps are continuing to tweak this, make sure we have the right language, make sure we go through the feedback loops, double checking that we've got all the values are kind of lining up with the strategic priority. And then the promise statement, I apologize. And then the strategic priorities, making sure we've got the right three buckets. We're going to talk about that here in a second. And then from there, that's when we're going to start adding, to Martin's language, the meat and bones to how to actually get to this, and where the board will hold the superintendent accountable for moving the organization forward to achieving the promise on a daily basis. So hopefully that helps clarify the partnerships, the thriving environment, the academic excellence. Those pieces are still there. Now, I do want to say, on the academic excellence, I would ask, you know what, I'm going to keep it there for a second. Does that make sense before I move on? Because it makes sense in my head, but I want to make sure it makes sense in the board and in the committee's head.
To that, just briefly. So I think that one of the things we talked about in how the promise happens and how you have caring and accepting and a caring and accepting environment is based on relationship. And you're not just looking at relationship between students and staff. You're really taking those relationships and you combine those caring and personal relationships with pursuing the preparation for the academic part. And what you get is those community partnerships. And in order to be prepared for life beyond high school, I think a very real aspect of that is networking and broadening horizons and awareness of the world outside of Wenatchee High School in our local community and outside of our local community in our state, and becoming kind of a global citizen. So I think you're going to see those things really fleshed out more, because they're such integral parts of completing that promise statement.
Well said, Rebecca.
Rebecca, in response to Julie's comment, In regards to the first sentence, you know, I think we all want our kids to be accepting, caring, you know, grounded, diversity, inclusion, but the reality is that that's not what our students experience. And you have to have a safe, caring environment for children to grow and flourish. You know, ideally, in a perfect world, we shouldn't have to include this, but the reality is that a lot of our students struggle with making connections, feeling safe within their peers, within their teachers, because of their gender, their race, their religion, their ethnicity. So although we want in a perfect world, we shouldn't have to put it, we're in a world where we do need to put it, because this is what's creating a safe learning environment for an accepting environment for our kids.
The number one word, I was shocked when Diana and I pulled back all the committees from that, either that second or third meeting, I can't remember which one. Both Diana and I looked at each other and we were shocked at the number of times the word safe was in there. And I think Michelle spoke about that earlier. I was blown away, because in my mind, as an educator, I know how important safety is before you ever get to academics. You can't bridge that gap if a kid does not feel safe, if a kid does not feel like they belong, if they do not feel like they've ever been seen before. You're never going to have an authentic answer. You're never going to be able to offer up at times incorrect thinking. Because it's too challenging or to literally be who you are. So I was shocked that our group was able to gather that much data that said safety is critical.
It's huge. And I think part of having a diverse group, you get different lenses, because we tend to see our, you know, things through our own lens. My lens comes from a person, you know, that was raised in a low socioeconomic family by a single parent, a person of color. And can I say that I didn't grow up in Wenatchee, but can I say that I was in a safe environment 100%, 90, 80% of the time when I was in school? I wasn't. So having that diversity and different voices, it just helps the team look at things from a different perspective, and we all learn from it.
And I don't disagree at all. Like I said, I'm more sad that we do have to put things out there. But I agree, it needs to be there in this day and age. And so I have no dispute with that at all. You know, it's in part, I wish everyone could have grown up with my values and things, because that was just inherent in what I grew up with. And so this has been a learning exercise in a lot of things. And so, and I've seen it in my own students where, or my own kids with this online learning thing, they don't feel safe speaking up through the, you know, through the screen, but they'd feel no issue at all raising their hand in class. And it's interesting how even the environmental factors change that relationship and dynamic. So no, I think it's a great statement in these day and ages. It's needed. Like I said, I was more just kind of like sad that we do need to even say it, but that's sad for society, not for any particular person here, there, or anything the district's doing or isn't doing, but just but I think it's inherent with what, also at the same time inherent in anything that we would be doing going forward. But if it needs to be articulated, I'm on board with articulating that for sure.
I have a couple more comments. The first one is Martin learned to be patient, which is fine. And it's, by the way, extremely encouraging. Thank you, because we can now see. But thinking of what Julie said, there's a method that we thought that I think is important for all of us technically. I'm going to phrase it this way: when is a requisite a goal? Because in strategic planning or visions, you reduce to a core minimum. And in the course of doing that, you leave out all the supporting pillars. And that's a recipe for omission, misunderstanding, and confusion. And it's inevitable because you have to reduce. But I think what we've been talking about now, to some extent, is the impatient people talking about a second goal, and the wiser, patient people saying you're not going to even get there unless you can meet the starting requirements. and they're both important for the strategic plan.
Martin, I'm also impatient. And, you know, when I brought up math, just sometimes I feel like just even for my own understanding, I have to come up with a concrete example of why I feel like this big picture idea is important.
Martin, you have not been the only one who struggles with it. It's hard to see the abstractness at the very beginning, and the board was at the very, very beginning where it was all just kind of abstract. And I think slowly we're starting to put form to what we're doing, and we're starting to slowly see how this work is starting to take shape. And I think now people are able to have a better understanding of what we're trying to accomplish here as a school district. And then the hard work is making that promise. You know, today we may not be there, but tomorrow we better be a step closer, a step closer. And I think that's why we also gravitated to that promise. Again, it feels like that personal connection that if I don't do this, I'm letting you down. I'm letting you down. And that's quite honestly how we want to feel to our students. If we don't accomplish these things, we're going to let our kids down.
So I don't want to put a damper by saying the word trust, but I liken this promise to really Maslow's hierarchy. You know, in order for us to feel like our district gets to this self-actualization point, you know, we are essentially at this lowest level where safety, feeling accepted and cared for, we are on this infancy level of trust versus mistrust, feeling safe so that we can trust others and we know that others can trust us. So I don't know if that's an oversimplification, but I think it's important that we're saying that this is critical in order for us to move forward, that this is a foundation grounded in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And honestly, I will say that I think many districts in our state are putting more of this on their pages. You know, it's not like this is something, you know, unusual, but more districts are realizing the value in DEI work and how that raises everybody up in their district over the long term. So I think this is great work, and I look forward to seeing how other things that we might be adjusting as well. But this is it's really critical. And I think we've seen it during COVID as well. As some of you said that you didn't necessarily get response beyond the COVID window. Again, it's that safety. I have to feel safe right now, right? I can't think beyond COVID for 5 years out if I'm just struggling to stay safe, particularly if I feel that my community group is at greater risk. So let's equalize that in our schools. Let's have everybody feeling safe and accepted and caring, reflecting on Maria's reflection that it didn't always feel that way for her. Some of us grew up feeling that way. That is a privilege that I fully recognize I had, and that probably others maybe of you watching had, but we have to realize that not everybody has that. So.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. I'm going to just transition because like our strategic planning committee meetings, time flies. It's already 2:10. I would ask Michelle and Arlette to talk about our request to transition one of the strategic priorities from academic excellence to opportunities. Michelle, Arlette.
Okay.
Yes. So like we've been mentioning right now, we believe that academic excellence is a little too not double-sided, but you know, if we want to focus on, we can't have both. without, or we can't have one without implementing the others. So I think if we truly focus on the opportunities, the DEI of this strategic plan, we'll truly be able to just get academic excellence, like that's implied. However, if we just move it to opportunities, we think that will be able to solidify our vision to make the strategic plan have those steps that we can hold the board, the administration accountable for. And I personally would love to see opportunities in place of academic excellence. I don't know, Michelle, you have anything to add?
Sure, thanks, Arlette. I had to really think about this one, to be honest, because I want to see academic excellence somewhere, but I agree that it's probably maybe too narrow to be in this spot. And so I hope you don't mind if I get in the weeds a little bit, but sometimes just to wrap my brain around it, I have to think about a couple specific examples. And Arlette could definitely talk about this. This is one of the things that came up in our, so Arlette, jump in, okay? But one of the things we talked about in our committee is that some of the high school students, some of our Latino students don't necessarily feel like they have the same academic opportunities at our high school. They don't necessarily feel welcome in an AP class. Or if they're in an AP class, they don't necessarily feel accepted in the class. They may not feel that they have the same opportunities to get into some of our electives that we have at the high school that are so, that we're so well known for. And a couple of the examples I thought of with some other high schools in our region, I thought about Bridgeport High School that I visited about 3 years ago, where one of their missions was that every student was going to take at least one AP class. So every student in that high school was given the opportunity to see what that's like and to discover that it actually was for them as well, right? And then I think about Quincy, and I honestly don't remember if they have a separate junior high school, whatever, but I know that they were all AVID. So it wasn't just a select group of kids who got to learn the AVID skills or that were seen as kids who were good enough to need those skills to move on, but all of their students were given the opportunity to learn those skills. And so that's kind of how that's how this started to make more sense to me, having that opportunities is a sort of a broader goal that perhaps academic excellence would fit under. I don't really like the idea of just assuming that will happen. I don't think it will happen on its own just because we provide more opportunities. I think we also have to be really strategic about academic excellence, but you can't have it for everybody if the opportunities aren't there. So I don't know, Paul, if there's anything else that.
No, that was really a good way of looking at it. Both Arlette and Michelle put to that we want to go to a high level. And we felt that academic excellence actually was a notch below. Just as both Arlette and Michelle described, if you don't have those opportunities, and the reality is, and I think it was Denali, but Arlette, you could correct me, as she sat in an AP course as the only Latina, only Latino in that entire class. And I believe she said it was like weeks, if not over a month and a half before she felt even comfortable engaging in the overall conversation. Because in her mind, she's like, do I even belong here? We've had a lot of powerful moments in our group, but it was a top 5 powerful moment where you're like, we're not offering this opportunity for all kids.
So,
you go for it. Go for it.
Sorry, because the way I'm looking at it on the screen right now, how you've kind of modified stuff makes a lot of sense to me, keeping academic excellence up here, but having these 3 things being what creates, what defines academic excellence in terms of opportunities, partnerships, and thriving environment. So I feel like academic excellence can still be on top, but these are the things, the things that make up the academic excellence. So by having more opportunities, valuable opportunities, we are striving for the academic excellence. By having partnerships with parents and families and teachers and whatnot, we're you know, trying to get each student to perform to their potential. So I feel like having academic excellence as the goal, and then these three things being what we're doing to achieve that, makes sense to me. Because I agree the opportunities are important, but I don't want to say academic opportunities, because there needs to be some qualitative measure of that. I mean, you know, are we just going skills based now, or are we really trying to find enriching opportunities? And so that's why I say, you know, academic excellence on top with opportunities, partnerships, and a thriving environment being the things that will help boost the academic excellence. Just my thought on it.
I just want to say, unless the words academic excellence are a barrier for some people, some larger percentage of our population. If that's true, then maybe equity belongs, or the thriving environment is more important than the academic excellence in the order of things, going back to Michelle Sandberg's comment about the comparison of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, if the safe environment is the foundational piece, then academics will follow.
I have a few comments. I've never liked academic excellence. I think it has connotations of privilege, and it doesn't encompass the full spectrum of what education is. And actually, when I look at the screen, when we wrote our values, I was pleased that we wrote excellence in learning. I actually pulled out a thesaurus, and I've just discarded it 30 seconds ago. But I think opportunity is better than academic excellence. But if you used that, you'd have to footnote and explain what you meant. And this is really clumsy. Excellence in learning opportunities, maybe something like that. But I think we've got to get across that meaning, because I think if we put out opportunities, it's going to be misinterpreted by many, many, many people. And similarly, academic excellence can be exclusion. It can exclude people. Or skills is sometimes not a good word because it implies other things. So it's difficult to find something that doesn't carry baggage, but trying to get that slightly different concept, I would actually go for excellence in learning. That was what I liked last time around.
What's the definition of academic excellence? I mean, what does that mean?
So one of the comments that did come up, and Michelle or Martin, you said it, academic excellence comes across as a white privileged statement, and it is not an all-inclusive, because we all have a definition, our own definition of what academic excellence is. It's AP, probably a white older male, it's AP, you're nailing 4.0 or beyond. But I think academic excellence can and should look different. And just one more quick piece, Martin, under each one of the strategic priorities, we'll have a very brief definition of what it is, because you're right, words matter. So we want to be really clear. So that will be something else that will come along with this, is a brief description of what each of those strategic priorities are. So as others start to develop the work underneath it, there's clarity there as to what we're trying to do. So I don't know if I answered your question, Maria, or I filibustered your question.
No, I think you actually, I mean, yeah, that's exactly what it means. And again, if you look at our AP courses or our enrichment program in general in our district, you got a very small percentage of our district that would fall into the academic excellence category. And again, that's not inclusive of what the purpose of the statement is.
Jerry, Rebecca, or Arlette, just on this topic from the perspective, if you can channel all your committee members, if there are other thoughts that the board needs to hear.
I was just going to say, I look at terms like that, and I think of my son, who is technically, I mean, he's cognitively, developmentally disabled. And I think, what does academic excellence look like for him? And he may never have the capability of being a 4.0 student in the standard education system and being in an AP class, but he can perform to his fullest potential and be given all sorts of enriching and inclusive opportunities. And that's really what, when we're looking at the broad spectrum, and I think it does, if we make some sort of change, whatever that looks like to the language, it will be more reflective of the idea of having a more individualized education pathway that meets the needs of students where they are and promotes their success for their desired goals and the goals of, you know, their support system.
Can I jump in? Because I think what she's articulated is, I think, sort of almost exactly what the board was hoping would be the focus, and whether maybe that is the wrong statement, if it is feeling exclusive to some, you know, on somewhat of a flip side, I mean, that's exactly what we meant to achieve, was that we realize academic excellence looks different for each person. And in some ways, you know, I vacillate between, do we try to bring people up to feel like they're academically excellent, or do we just change the word because it's stigmatizing right now? So, you know, if it's academic excellence, you know, whether we call it enhancement in learning, I think there needs to be some type of academic focus. I agree that it looks different. What is excellence looks different for everybody. And maybe we say something, it's, you know, enhancement or something. But ultimately, I think the goal is to have everyone feel like they are academically excellent, and through this process. So, you know, maybe it is changing the words, but maybe opportunity is not the right one, but something to convey that every student can achieve academic excellence at their respective level.
And to piggyback on that, one conversation we had in the group was talking about that, we had talked about the term grade level access to grade level content. And one comment that I made was, for some students, that's not enough. For some students to be meeting their potential, they need access to material and experiences that's far beyond that. And so I think stepping back and looking at all of the different types of students, kind of roles or different students that we serve, we're able to kind of then come back and make a broader statement that communicates excellence for individuals, I guess. And opportunities may not be the word. I agree with that.
Rebecca, you put these words into my brain: reach your greatest potential.
I'm not going to speak in defense of academic excellence as a term. I mean, probably before this committee, it wasn't a trigger for me. And I can see now how it is. Yeah, it's more specific to a particular demographic, probably who's had particular experiences in their past. What I do like about the concept of it is that you have a high bar. And so I do feel strongly that in our district that how do I say this? There have been lower expectations of certain demographic of kids, and I think that's very tragic.
Yeah.
And so the idea of having academic excellence for all, to me, is not about me being, you know, a white person, right? It's about me caring about people who deserve to be lifted up, you know, to be able to be lifted out of poverty, that sort of thing, that we're not going to expect less of you. And so I think that term probably means different things to different people, you know. I didn't come from Harvard. I didn't come, you know, so I don't come with that. Like, I'm not thinking that my kids need to go to Ivy League schools or whatever. But what I want is, my heart is, I want everybody to have this access to a strong education. And, you know, we can go back to that AP or, you know, college and the high school sort of example. But when you have a large percentage of high school students who aren't accessing higher level content, that's, like I said, a little tragic, I think. So anyway, I'm not advocating for that. Yeah, we can let that go. But I still believe in the underlying sort of concept of
Lifting up. Yeah.
This
You
is
said exactly
why
what I
we
was
wanted-
like thinking, and you said it so well. So thank you.
But this is exactly why we do these feedback loops. This is exactly why.
Can I piggyback on what Michelle just said? I agree that I think academic excellence has different meanings to different people. And yes, it can be kind of a privilege meaning, but I do like the word opportunities, but I miss not having the word academic because we're a school, for goodness sake. So, my thinking is we're looking at academic opportunities, right? Whether it's increasing AVID access or having an AP class available for everyone or increasing enhancements for people who are never going to take an AP class. And again, rather than setting the standard now, but I guess I like the word opportunities because excellence has that kind of very fluid connotation for many people, but an opportunity is an opportunity, but I would like it to be academic opportunities. Just a thought, because we are an institution of academia. So that's what I'm going to throw out. Thanks.
What if we've made it like individual academic excellence? Because I agree with that. Academic needs to be in there because we are a school, and that's, we're here to educate children. And like I said, with opportunities, my concern was there is a qualitative as far as educational component with it. So, I don't know if individualized academic excellence may help alleviate some of the concern.
Sorry, I thought you finished, Julie.
So no, sorry.
I think we're educators, and I think academics is an old-fashioned word with a narrow dimension. I really do.
I would offer this. I think the committee has your perspective. I think you've done a nice job of bringing your perspective forward, and these four incredible individuals will bring that back to our next meeting for them to chomp around and really kind of take what your feedback was and make it come to life for the board. So that's what as opposed to maybe doing wordsmithing here, which is never fun, that we take your thoughts, we take your opinions, and we bring them back to the subcommittee.
I love that we have a committee that we can send it back to. So that sounds great.
I do too, because they're so much smarter than definitely than me, but it just works.
Thank you, committee.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is it's not perfect, but we are definitely in the ball. We are definitely on the same, playing the same game that the board is. The board feels very comfortable with language. There's some tweaking, there's some other little modifications that we knew were going to need to happen, but we're in the same game, correct?
Yeah.
All right. Yes. All right. Maria had a run and is doing picking up Noah, so she moved on to a phone.
I think prompts they've absolutely nailed, in my opinion. So, but yeah, there's obviously more stuff that needs to be looked at. So,
Yep.
Great job.
We'll keep the feedback loop alive and well, and the committee will be back to you. There's a great chance again next month. Just knowing how much they accomplish in 2 meetings, it blows my mind. So I'm very confident that we'll be back the following month to give the board another update on where we're at, but we're definitely going to take your feedback.
Very good. We're looking forward to that. Thanks to all the committee members for their dedication, and sounds like there's a whole lot going on even outside the meetings, and we really appreciate you stepping up to help us out with that and help the community. And it's broader than the board. It's just, it's going to serve our community very well. Hi, Maria. And so unless there's any further business, I'll bring the meeting to a close and just want to remind board members that you owe me homework tonight.
See, committee members, you're not the only ones who have homework.
Laura, I can't risk a mischievous comment. Arlette and Denali put me through a magnificent third degree. I've watched Aria at the school board meetings, and I've not met Jason yet, but to all of you adults in that group, pay attention to their students. They're great.
Mhm.
Thank you, students.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you so much.